Okay, so I've gotten straight A pluses for 3.5 years now in my studies in engineering. And a lot of times at school, when people ask me for some sort of advice, I offer some sort of study technique or method to them. But a lot of times they say that they've tried these different methods and it just doesn't work because they have a bad attention span and they can't focus. So in this video, we're going to outline the root cause of how that bad attention span affects your studying, and then talk about some short and long-term solutions that we can use to improve your attention span, improve your focus, so that you can study better. So let's first outline the problem. I want you to look at this plot, okay? And on this plot, on the x-axis, we have our time, and on the y-axis, we have our focus, okay? To do any task, to be able to focus on any task, there's a threshold focus level or a threshold barrier of focus that is required in order to do that task. And if you don't have enough focus, if your focus is below that threshold, then you can't do that task or you can't focus on it. And if it's above that threshold, then you can. And so this is where the issue comes in, because what if your baseline focus is below that threshold? Well, now you really can't do any work unless you can somehow spike your focus above that threshold. And this is becoming incredibly important and more important because focus or attention span is not increasing with time. It's not staying the same with time. Most people's baseline focus is slowly decreasing because of constantly being exposed to overstimulating content, social media, video games, TV, whatever it is. And so we really need to find a way to get our focus or attention span above this threshold, because the problem's only going to get greater. And the gap between your baseline focus and the barrier of focus or the threshold of focus is only increasing. You can see it's a lot bigger here than it is here. So we just got to find a way to get this focus above the threshold. And there's pretty much 3 ways in which we can do that. So there's short-term fixes, and suppose this is our baseline. The short-term fixes will create a quick rise in our focus, allow us to complete the task, but we didn't address the root cause, so our baseline focus goes back to the beginning anyways. So that's one way we can handle things. An alternative way to handle things would be to learn and increase our focus skill, or increase our focus baseline until it's above that barrier. And now that we're above the baseline, we don't need to use any of these short-term techniques because our baseline focus is just high enough to be able to sit down and do the task at any time. So that's the second way we can handle it. And the third way we can handle it is, let's suppose that this is our baseline, okay? The third way to handle this would be, instead of bringing the baseline above the threshold, we can just bring our threshold of focus below the baseline. So instead of increasing our focus to be able to meet the needs for the task, we are decreasing the focus requirements for the task such that our baseline focus is above that. And so those are like the 3 ways that we can handle focus and attention span when it comes to trying to study and trying to focus. Those are short-term increases, long-term increases, and lowering the barrier. And I want to point out that the long-term improvements to your focus are what's going to give you the greatest result, because it is actually addressing, or these techniques actually address the root cause of why your focus is bad. But it is not the thing that we should work on first, because the long-term improvements don't happen overnight and they take time. And so if you're looking for a solution, a band-aid solution to help you now, we want to build up the short-term solution first. And then once we have the short-term solutions that can cover our needs right now, then we can learn to build up our long-term focus as a skill while still having that safety net of having those short-term techniques in case we need them. So let's first look at these short-term techniques and tricks that you can use to increase your focus. These are the ones that you see often, and they allow you to temporarily increase your focus so that you can do whatever task you need, and then you can get out and you're done. And so these are techniques like setting timers when you work, tracking the amount of time you focus, controlling your environment, removing distractions, turning off your phone, breaking big tasks up into smaller tasks, setting intentions of what task you're going to do, and all of these different things. And so all of these things have value, and all of these things are good, and you've probably heard of all these things before. So they're good. You just need to play around to see what works for you and what doesn't. Pick the ones that work for you and go from there. These things all work because they are conducive to getting you in a state which is good for active work. So let's say you have focus, right? Your focus is here, and your focus, it could be going to different things. It could be going to your work. It could be going to your phone. It could be going to friends. And it could be going to the TV, let's call it, okay? And so to get the most optimal work done, to be able to focus, you're trying to focus on your work, obviously, in this case. And so any technique that strengthens the focus on the work and that makes it harder to focus on a phone or friends or TV, those are typically those short-term solutions that'll help you get into the environment conducive to good work. And so, for example, when you cut out distractions, you are effectively getting rid of this path. So your focus doesn't have that path to go to your phone because you've cut off that option. And for example, if you control your environment, now you cut off the path that your focus can take to your friends. And when you study in a different room, now you cut off the focus path to your TV. And maybe you're setting timers for your work. So now this strengthens this path to the work focus. And now you can see the premise behind how all these general techniques that you see online do work. But the issue is it good to control your environment? Is it good to limit distractions? Is it good to do all of these things? Yes, but they are only short-term solutions because we can see that our focus dips below the baseline anyways. And is this optimal? Is it optimal to always have to do some sort of technique or trick or other method in order to just get in a state that is capable of work? It's probably not optimal, right? Because that takes time and that takes energy in itself, right? It takes energy to set up your environment to work. It takes energy to cut out your distractions. And so ideally, we don't need to rely on these short-term solutions. They're band-aid solutions. They're temporary solutions. And they're good and they work, but there's a better way instead of just relying on them. So instead of relying on the short-term increase in focus that comes from all the different techniques we know, we instead raise our baseline focus. So for example, we were down here. If we can train our focus, we can increase it past the baseline. And now all of a sudden, focusing is always going to be easier because our focus skill is just stronger. And this is what I was saying earlier about the long-term solution producing the greatest result. Because if we tackle the problem at its cause, at its root cause, which is that we have a bad attention span and we have bad focus, if we tackle that at its root cause and we increase that skill, we improve our attention span, we improve our focus, then we don't need to be spending time and energy on these techniques or tricks in order to improve our attention span because it's already high enough to do the task that we need to do, right? So I want you to think of focus as a skill, okay? And the big takeaway is, I talked about this in another video, but skills can be developed. Just like going to the gym, you can get bigger muscles. Just like learning an instrument, you can get better. Just like those things, your focus can be trained and can be improved. So how do we train it then? You're not going to go to the gym and do like brain curls or something. It's not a thing, right? But we can take the idea from the gym and apply it to our focus, right? So in the gym, you're going to go and you're going to lift progressively heavier and heavier weights every time because you're training your specific muscles, right? So instead of that, we're going to be training our focus by lifting heavier and heavier with our brain in order to improve our focus and to improve our attention span so that we can have that higher baseline and then we can always just focus at a higher level. So what is the exercise you're going to use then to train your brain, to train your focus, and to train your attention span? Well, like I said earlier, it's not brain curls, but it is meditation. And so meditation basically trains the skill of presence. Presence is the ability to be present and to focus on whatever's in front of you. And so obviously, if you have a stronger presence, your focus is going to be stronger too. You're going to have a stronger attention span. Now, presence is one of the top skills you can develop. It's not just going to help you in your school. It's going to help you have better relationships because you're more present when you're talking to people. It'll help you train better in the gym because you're going to be more present and focused in the gym. But it will definitely help us in our studies because we can be more present and focused on the work ahead of us. So how do you do meditation then? Well, it's basically just focusing on something. And when your focus drifts away, you bring your focus back to that something. So in most cases, you have to focus, or you're trying to focus on the breath. And the breath is not a very engaging thing to focus on. There's not much going on there. It's kind of boring, right? It's not fun breathing, right? It's nice, but it's not fun. And so eventually your focus will drift away from your breath, okay? And then all that meditation is bringing that focus back to the breath, okay? And you just repeat that over and over again. And every time you do that, it's essentially a rep in the gym. You're training your ability to bring your focus back to the breath. And so eventually, A, you should be able to focus on the breath for longer times. B, when your focus drifts, you should be able to notice that drift faster and bring it back to your breath. And so there's two aspects there. It's the length of the focus and it's the ability to notice that quickly and bring your focus back. And so this obviously translates very well to school because it can help you focus better on the work that's in front of you. And once your focus drifts, you can bring it back that much faster. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people say they have tried meditation and it's just uncomfortable. They don't like to sit there and it's just not fun. But here's the thing. In the gym, when you're lifting weights, it's not comfortable. Your muscles get sore, right? But that's the whole point. Your muscles get sore, they tear down, and then they can rebuild to be bigger and stronger, right? It is the same thing with meditation. It will be uncomfortable, but that's the point. It is supposed to be uncomfortable because without that discomfort, you are not growing. You're not learning. You're not getting better in the skill of focus. That discomfort means that your focus is improving. Every time your focus drifts and you have to kind of like uncomfortably bring that focus back to the breath, that is your focus improving right then and there. And so for the people who say that, oh no, it's uncomfortable, you got to understand it's supposed to be uncomfortable. You are not learning. You are not growing. You're never going to do anything if it's not uncomfortable. And there's another point that comes from that. And that's if you've tried meditation and it doesn't feel uncomfortable, well, that means you're probably not actually improving your focus. You're probably not actually growing that skill because you're not experiencing that discomfort. It's like I said earlier in the gym, if you only ever train to the feeling of discomfort, you are never going to grow. You need to be training adequately close to failure. And by doing this, you should be able to see your focus time grow in time. And all of a sudden, you have now increased your baseline focus, like you see here, and focusing on your work or your studies or whatever it is just going to be that much easier. This is the solution to the root cause of your bad attention span. And yes, it will take time. This is not an overnight thing. This is a slow process that you'll take time to see results. Just like in the gym, it takes time to see results, but they are stacking slowly and slowly and slowly. And so eventually you should be able to look back and see the results over a large time period. So now onto the third way about improving your focus or improving your ability to focus on your work. It was actually lowering the barrier required to focus. So that looked like bringing this line down to here. So now our baseline focus is adequate in order to focus on whatever the task is. And this is possible, right? This makes sense, right? Because for example, you would have no issue on focusing on a video game or focusing on your social media or focusing on your friends, right? Those things are easy to focus on. So why can you focus on those and not your work? And that's because the barrier for focus or the threshold to focus is higher or lower depending on what that actual thing is, what you're trying to focus on. So for example, school has a higher barrier of focus than video games, right? And that's because video games is obviously a lot more engaging and stimulating than school. So what if we lowered the requirement, the focus requirement for school, and now it is a lot easier to focus on that thing, even though our focus itself hasn't improved. And how do we do this? Well, we need to make the school more engaging or more stimulating, okay? And so there's two ways to do this. One plays more into the long-term category and one plays more into the short-term category. So first we'll talk about the more short-term solution. And that comes from making your work more engaging, making it more fun, making it more stimulating. So it's kind of difficult to do this, and depending on what you're working on, it might not be possible. If you're doing a reading, like there's not much ways that you can make that fun. But depending on what it is, depending on what work you're doing, there might be different ways. So for example, last year when I was studying for my multivariable calc exam, I'd been doing tons of practice exams alone and I wanted to make things more fun. So me and my buddy, we went to school, we got on the whiteboards, and we would basically race to solve questions on the practice exam as fast as possible. And none of us had any difficulty focusing, obviously, because it was fun. We had half the whiteboard each. We would flip the question over and we'd try to solve it as fast as possible. And we'd have the other people come and check to see if it was right. And so it was fun. It was a game. We were focused and we were learning. So you can find ways to incorporate things like that into your work. And like I said earlier, it's not always going to be possible, but for certain things it is. Now, the one caveat with this is that it is a short-term solution. You're not always going to have access to making your work more fun. You're not always going to be able to find a way to do that. And so that's why I think the more powerful long-term solution here is to artificially make school more engaging. So in the scenario where we were setting up the game and racing to see who could complete it first, that was actually making the school more fun and actually making it more enjoyable. But that's not always possible. What we can do instead is to remove other bad, heavily stimulating bad habits from our lives, which will then effectively make school feel more fun and more engaging because you've removed the bad overstimulating habits, right? If you're constantly watching TV or watching social media or playing video games, that is a lot of stimulation right there. And then if you try to move to a slower task like school, like studying, like something else like that, it's very difficult to be able to focus on schoolwork if you have so many other heavily stimulating bad habits in your life because you're used to that heavy stimulation. And so when you go to something like studying, which is not heavily stimulating, then it just doesn't feel that good. Now, what if we cut out those bad habits from our life instead? What if we stop scrolling as much? What if we stop playing video games as much? What if you stop watching as much TV? What if you stop all the heavily stimulating activities? Now, all of a sudden, because you're not exposed to those activities, the activities that are less stimulating like school, going outside, doing all these things, your enjoyment of those effectively increase because you're not exposed to the more stimulating things. And so by cutting out the bad habits, the school focus requirement slowly decreases because you're just not being constantly stimulated by the bad habits anymore. And so that's it. Those are the three elements to improving your focus. First, you want to start by building that safety net, by learning those short-term techniques and applying them. And now that you have that safety net, you can safely develop the skill of focus long-term. And then in the end, if you still want to improve, you can look at lowering the barrier of focus. So I hope this video can help you improve your attention span, improve your focus so that you can get more work done in less time, then you have more time to spend how you want.